She grew up in a place where mornings began with noise instead of music. The sound of traffic, shouting vendors, and old machines filled the air before the sun fully rose. The room she shared with her family was small and worn. The walls carried cracks like old scars, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. Still, she woke up every day with quiet hope, even when there was little reason to do so. Money was always short. Some days there was enough food, some days there was not. She learned early how to stay silent when adults talked about bills and debts. She learned how to smile even when her stomach hurt. She learned how to make herself small so she would not become a burden. To the outside world, she was just another poor girl trying to survive. She worked wherever she could, cleaning floors, carrying bags, helping in kitchens, and running small errands. Her hands were often rough and tired, but she never complained. She believed that hard work was the only way forward. There was no space for dreams in her daily routine, at least not openly. Dreams were dangerous when life demanded survival. Yet music found her anyway. It started with sounds drifting through open windows, a radio playing softly in a distant room, a keyboard melody coming from a passing car. Sometimes, when she walked past rich homes, she heard piano music flowing through tall gates. The sound stopped her every time. She would stand still, pretending to adjust her shoes or tie her scarf, just to listen longer. She did not know the names of the notes. She had never touched a piano, but something inside her responded to the music. It felt familiar, like a voice she had known all her life but never heard clearly. The sound made her forget hunger and fear, even if only for a few moments. At night, when everyone slept, she tapped rhythms on the table or the edge of her bed. Her fingers moved quietly, copying the patterns she remembered. Sometimes she hummed low so no one would hear. Music became her secret place, the only thing that belonged fully to her. No one encouraged her. No one noticed. In her world, talent meant nothing without money. Lessons cost more than her family earned in weeks. Instruments were locked behind glass doors in expensive stores. She once stood outside one such shop, staring at a piano displayed under bright lights. It looked unreal, like something from another life. A guard noticed her worn clothes and told her to move away. She did, without arguing. That moment stayed with her. From then on, she watched from afar. Whenever she passed places where music was played, she slowed her steps. She memorized melodies the way others memorized phone numbers. She listened carefully, holding each sound inside her mind, replaying it later in silence. Life continued, heavy and demanding. Her family relied on her income, small as it was. She never spoke about music because it felt selfish. Wanting something beautiful felt wrong when everyone around her was just trying to eat. One afternoon, while working at a large public hall as temporary help, she saw a piano up close for the first time. It stood in the center of the room, polished and grand. Light reflected off its surface like water. People walked around it as if it were just furniture, but to her, it felt alive. She did not approach it. She only looked. Someone noticed her staring and laughed softly, whispering something to another worker. She lowered her eyes immediately. Shame came quickly, like it always did. She reminded herself that she did not belong in places like this. Still, something changed that day. Seeing the piano so close made the distance between her and the dream feel real. Painful but real. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to sit there, to let her fingers touch the keys instead of tapping on wood. She told herself it would never happen. Days passed, then weeks. Work moved her from one place to another. Each job felt temporary, unstable. But she kept going. She always did. Inside her, the music grew stronger, even as she tried to ignore it. People around her saw only what they expected to see. A poor girl with tired eyes and plain clothes. No one asked about her thoughts. No one asked about her dreams. They assumed she had none. She heard comments sometimes. How people like her should stay in their place. How talent was something you were born into with money and connections. She learned to pretend she did not hear. Silence protected her. Then came the invitation that changed everything. It was not meant for her. It was meant for the place where she worked that day. A high-profile event was being organized, filled with important guests, wealth, and attention. She was assigned a small role barely noticeable. Her job was to stay out of the way. As she entered the building, she felt the difference immediately. The air smelled clean and expensive. The floors shined. Voices were calm and confident. Everything felt far removed from her world. And there it was again. A piano stood near the main hall, larger and more beautiful than any she had seen before. It was prepared for a performance later in the evening. She stopped walking without realizing it. Her heart began to beat faster. She knew she should move. She knew she should not stare. But something pulled her forward. Just a little. Not enough to touch, only enough to see the keys clearly. For a moment, she forgot where she was. That was when she heard laughter behind her. A confident voice spoke, full of ease and pride. Someone important, someone used to being listened to. She did not turn around immediately, but she knew the tone well. It was the sound of someone who never doubted themselves. The people around reacted quickly, stepping aside, greeting the voice with respect. She realized she was standing in the presence of someone powerful, someone rich beyond imagination. She felt exposed. Her hands tightened at her sides as she stepped back, preparing to disappear into the background again. She had learned how to do that well. But before she could leave, the voice spoke again, louder this time, amused. The words were not kind. They were not cruel either. They were worse. They were dismissive. She understood then that she had been seen, not as a person but as a joke, as someone who dared to look at something that was never meant for her. Her face burned. The room felt suddenly smaller. She lowered her head and took a step away, telling herself to forget the moment like she had forgotten so many others. But deep inside, something refused to shrink this time. A quiet strength she did not know she had began to rise. She did not speak. Not yet. But the seed was planted. And from that moment on, her life began to move toward a turning point she could not have imagined. The room slowly returned to its normal noise after the laughter faded. But inside her, nothing felt normal anymore. She moved away from the piano as she was supposed to, blending back into her small role. Her face stayed calm, but her heart was loud. Every word she had heard repeated itself in her mind, again and again. She focused on her work, doing everything carefully so no one would notice her. Carrying items, cleaning corners, standing quietly when told. On the outside, she was the same poor girl everyone expected. On the inside, something had shifted. The man who laughed was impossible to ignore. He stood out without trying. People leaned toward him when he spoke. Their faces showed respect, sometimes even fear. His clothes were simple but expensive, his posture relaxed, like the world already belonged to him. She did not know his name, but she knew what he represented. Power, wealth, confidence built on success. From time to time, she felt his eyes pass over the room. Each time, she hoped he would not look her way again. Not because she was afraid, but because she did not want to feel small once more. Still, her thoughts kept returning to the piano. She remembered how close she had been, close enough to see the slight marks on the keys, close enough to imagine the sound they could make under her fingers. The memory made her chest feel tight. It was not pain exactly. It was longing. As the event continued, guests arrived one after another. Their conversations were light, filled with jokes, plans, and confidence. This world felt far from hers. No one talked about unpaid bills or empty kitchens here. No one worried about tomorrow. She wondered how it would feel to live like that. At one point, she was asked to bring water to a small group standing near the piano. Her steps slowed as she approached. The instrument seemed even larger up close, its surface reflecting the faces around it. She placed the glasses down quietly, keeping her eyes low. Someone noticed her hesitation and smiled in a way that was not kind. "You work here?" the person asked, more curious than respectful. She nodded softly. The person turned away, interest lost immediately. To them, she was just part of the background. She stepped back again, her hands shaking slightly. She hated that they shook. She told herself to breathe. She had faced harder things than this. Hunger, cold, fear. A few looks should not break her. But the piano kept calling her attention. Later, while the guests were busy elsewhere, the hall grew quieter. The piano stood alone for a moment, untouched. She looked around carefully. No one seemed to be watching. Her feet moved before her mind could stop them. She stood in front of it. Her heart raced. She knew she was not allowed. She knew this could cost her the job. Still, she lifted her hands slowly, stopping just above the keys. She did not touch them. She only hovered there, feeling the cold air, imagining the sound. That was when the voice returned. "You can't play the piano." The words were said casually, almost playful, but they hit her hard. She froze. Slowly, she turned around. The same man stood a few steps away, watching her with an amused expression. A small grin rested on his face, as if he had caught a child doing something silly. People nearby turned to look. She felt every eye on her. "I didn't say I could," she replied quietly, surprising herself. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting her to answer back. A soft chuckle escaped him. "Then why are you standing there like that?" he asked. "This isn't for you." His words were calm, but firm. Final. She swallowed. The old habit of silence pushed her to step away, to apologize, to disappear. But something held her in place. She thought of all the times she had been told what was not for her. Education, comfort, choice. "I just wanted to look," she said. A few people laughed lightly. Not loudly, not cruelly. Just enough to remind her where she stood. The man shrugged. "Looking is free," he said. "Playing is another story." She nodded and stepped back. Her face burned again, but this time, she felt something else too. A strange calm. She had spoken. It was a small thing, but it mattered to her. She returned to her duties, but her focus was gone. Her mind replayed the moment again and again. Not the laughter, not the shame. The way her voice had not completely failed her. The rest of the evening passed slowly. When the piano was finally played by the scheduled performer, the hall filled with applause. The music was beautiful, clean, practiced. Everyone admired it. She listened from a distance. It sounded perfect, but it did not move her the way she thought it would. She realized then that music was not only about skill. It was about feeling, about story. When the event ended, she helped clean up, her body tired but her mind awake. As she left the building, she took one last look at the piano before the lights dimmed. This time she did not feel small. She felt determined. That night she could not sleep. She replayed melodies in her head, tapping quietly on the table, on her knees, on the floor. She imagined the piano keys responding to her touch. She imagined sound filling a room because of her. The next days were different. She still worked the same jobs, still faced the same struggles. But now she listened more closely. She paid attention to every piece of music she heard. She watched videos from outside store windows. She learned patterns, timing, rhythm. She practiced on invisible keys whenever she was alone. People around her noticed nothing. They never do when change happens quietly. Inside her, confidence grew slowly, carefully. She was not trying to prove anything to anyone. Not yet. She was proving something to herself. Then, unexpectedly, she was called back to the same place for another event. This time, her hands did not shake when she saw the piano. She did not know it yet, but the next time she stood near those keys, walking away would no longer be an option. The moment was coming, and she would be ready. The second time she walked into the building, her steps felt different. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She knew the layout now. She knew where the piano stood. She knew the kind of people who would be inside. Nothing around her had changed, but something inside her had. She wore the same simple clothes, clean but worn. Her hair was tied back neatly. No one paid her special attention as she entered, and that was fine. Being unnoticed had always been her strength. The hall slowly filled with guests again. Soft conversations, quiet laughter, the sound of glasses touching. She moved around carefully, doing her work, but her eyes returned to the piano again and again. Stood waiting, silent, like it remembered her. She wondered if the man would be there again. The one who laughed. The one who told her she couldn't play. Part of her hoped he wouldn't come. Another part wanted him to see her standing there without fear. As the evening went on, she felt the familiar pull toward the piano. This time she didn't fight it. She had spent days listening, remembering, practicing in her own quiet way. Every spare moment had been filled with invisible keys and imagined sounds. She knew she wasn't trained, but she also knew she wasn't empty. A small crowd gathered near the piano as guests talked nearby. No performer had arrived yet. The space felt open, uncertain. She stood at a distance, watching. Then she heard the voice. The same confident tone. Calm. Certain. He had arrived. She didn't turn right away. She kept her focus on her task, but she felt his presence clearly. People shifted around him. Someone offered him a seat. Someone laughed a little too loudly at his words. Her heart beat faster, but she breathed through it. Moments later, she felt eyes on her. "You again," the man said. She looked up. He stood close, hands in his pockets, expression curious rather than mocking this time. "Yes," she replied. He glanced toward the piano, then back at her. "Still looking?" She paused. This time she did not lower her head. "Yes," she said again. "Still looking." A few people nearby noticed the exchange. Silence crept in slowly. He smiled, not unkindly, but with confidence. "You know," he said, "wanting something doesn't mean you can do it." She nodded. "I know." "Good," he said, "because that thing costs more than most people earn in years." She looked at the piano. "I'm not asking to own it." His smile faded slightly. "Then what are you asking?" She swallowed. This was the moment where fear usually won, where she stepped back, where she disappeared. "I'm asking to try," she said. The words felt heavy in the air. Someone laughed softly. Another person shook their head. The man studied her face for a long moment. "Try what?" he asked, though he already knew. "To play," she said. A quiet reaction moved through the group. Surprise, doubt, curiosity. He let out a small breath, half amused. "You don't have lessons," he said. "You don't even have a piano." "No," she replied. "Then why embarrass yourself?" She met his eyes. "Because I'm already embarrassed every day," she said calmly. This would just be honest. The words caught him off guard. His grin returned, but it was tighter now. "You can't play the piano," he said, repeating the sentence like a challenge. She felt the room waiting. "Let me decide that," she said quietly. Silence followed. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else looked away, uncomfortable. The man laughed once, short and sharp. "All right," he said. "Go on then." He stepped aside. Her heart slammed against her chest. Her legs felt weak, but they moved forward anyway. Each step felt louder than the last. She could feel every eye on her back. She reached the piano. Up close, it felt even more real. The keys were smooth and cool beneath her fingertips. She sat down slowly, afraid that if she rushed, the courage would leave her. For a moment, she did nothing. Her mind filled with noise, doubt, fear, the sound of laughter she expected to hear. Then she breathed. She closed her eyes, and she remembered the radio sounds, the distant melodies, the tapping on wood in the dark, the hunger, the long days, the quiet nights filled with music only she could hear. Her fingers moved. The first notes were soft, simple, almost uncertain. A few people shifted in their seats. She kept going. The sound grew steadier. The rhythm found its place. Her fingers followed memory, not training. Feeling, not rules. The room grew still. People stopped whispering. Faces changed. What started as curiosity turned into attention. The music wasn't perfect, but it was real. Each note carried something honest. Struggle, hope, longing. She forgot the crowd. She forgot the man. She forgot herself. There was only the piano and the story pouring out through her hands. When the final note faded, silence filled the room. For a long moment no one spoke. Then someone clapped. Another followed. The sound grew. She opened her eyes, breathing hard. Her hands trembled now, but not from fear. She stood up slowly. The man remained still, his expression unreadable. The grin was gone. He looked at the piano, then at her, and for the first time he did not speak. She walked away quietly, returning to her place. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She had played, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence after the applause felt heavier than the noise that came before it. People looked at each other, unsure of what to say. Some smiled softly. Some stayed still, as if they were afraid to break the moment. The air in the hall had changed, and everyone could feel it. She stood near the wall, her back straight, her hands folded tightly. Her heart was still racing, but there was a calm inside her now. She had done what she came to do. Whatever happened next was out of her control. The man remained by the piano. He slowly placed a hand on its surface, his eyes still fixed on the keys. The confidence he carried earlier had softened. He looked thoughtful, almost distant. People began to speak again, but their voices were quieter now. Some glanced at her with new interest. Not curiosity this time, but respect. A few whispered to each other, shaking their heads in disbelief. One guest stepped forward and asked her, gently, where she had learned to play. She answered honestly. I didn't, she said. I just listened. The answer surprised them. It was simple, but it carried weight. The man finally turned toward her. His face showed something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. You didn't lie, he said. She met his eyes. I never said I was trained. He nodded slowly. No, you didn't. The crowd watched closely. Everyone sensed that something important was happening, though no one could say what it was. He walked a few steps closer. Why didn't you stop when I told you to? He asked. She thought for a moment. Because I would have regretted it forever, she said. Her voice was steady, honest. He exhaled through his nose, a short breath that sounded like quiet laughter. Not mocking this time. Real. You surprised me, he admitted. The words were simple, but coming from him, they meant more than applause. The event organizers approached, unsure how to handle the situation. This was not planned. Nothing about her was planned. But the guests were clearly moved, and the mood had shifted in her favor. Someone suggested she play again. Another guest supported the idea. The man raised a hand gently, stopping them. Not now, he said. Let her breathe. She felt gratitude in that moment. Not because he defended her, but because he saw her as human. The rest of the event continued, but it felt different. Conversations returned, yet the earlier excitement was gone. Something deeper had taken its place. Later, as people prepared to leave, the man approached her again. This time, there were no jokes in his tone. What's your plan? He asked. She looked confused. My plan? Yes, he said. With music. She hesitated. No one had ever asked her that before. I don't have one, she replied. I just work. He studied her face carefully. That's not an answer, he said. She looked down. Then I don't know, she admitted. There was no shame in her voice, only truth. He nodded slowly, as if he respected that more than a confident lie. Would you want help? He asked. The question stunned her. She had imagined many endings to the night. None of them included this. I don't want charity, she said quietly. He smiled slightly. Neither do I. He explained simply. Music schools, practice rooms, time, structure. Not promises of fame or money, just opportunity. She listened carefully. This felt dangerous in a new way. Hope always did. I can't leave my family, she said. They need me. I know, he replied. We'd work around that. The conversation ended without clear decisions. He did not push. He did not demand an answer. He simply gave her a card and walked away. That night, she returned home later than usual. The room was quiet, Her family slept. She sat on the floor, holding the card in her hand, staring at it like it might disappear. Fear crept in. What if this was a mistake? What if she embarrassed herself again? What if she failed? She thought of the piano keys, the sound, the silence after. For the first time in her life, fear was not stronger than hope. The next days were restless. She continued working, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The card stayed hidden in her pocket, heavy with possibility. She practiced more than ever, using tables, walls, her own knees. She listened closely to every piece of music she could find. People around her noticed a change. She stood taller. She smiled more even when tired. Finally, she made the call. Her voice shook, but she spoke clearly. She did not beg. She did not promise greatness. She simply said she was willing to try. The meeting was set. When she returned to the building days later, it felt different again. Not as a worker, not as an outsider, as a possibility. The man greeted her with a nod. "You came," he said. "Yes," she replied. He gestured toward the piano room. "Then let's see how far listening has taken you." She took a deep breath and stepped forward. This time, she did not feel like she was trespassing. She felt like she was arriving. The room was quiet when she entered. Not the heavy silence of judgment, but a gentle one, like the pause before a deep breath. The piano stood near the window this time, light falling across the keys. It felt less like a test and more like a conversation waiting to happen. She sat down slowly. No crowd, no laughter, just a few people watching closely, including the man who had once smiled at her doubtfully. Her hands rested on her lap as she took a moment to steady herself. "Whenever you're ready," he said. She nodded. She began to play. This time there was no rush, no need to prove anything. The notes came softly, building one by one. They carried the weight of her past and the hope of something new. The room seemed to lean in, listening. She played longer than before. The music changed, moving between quiet and strong moments, just like her life had. When she finished, no one spoke right away. The man broke the silence. "You feel the music," he said. "That can't be taught." She didn't smile. She simply listened. From that day on, her life began to change in small, careful steps. There were no sudden miracles, no overnight success, just doors opening where walls once stood. She was given access to practice rooms, old pianos that had stories of their own. She practiced early in the mornings and late at night, fitting music between work and family duties. Some days were exhausting. Some days she wanted to quit. But she didn't. She struggled with reading notes at first. Her fingers didn't always obey her mind. She made mistakes, many of them. But unlike before, no one laughed. She was guided, corrected, encouraged. The man kept his distance, watching quietly. He never took credit. He never spoke over her. He simply made sure the path stayed open. Her family noticed the change before she told them anything. They saw how she rushed out early and came home late, tired but glowing. When she finally explained, there was fear at first. Fear of disappointment. Fear of false hope. But there was pride too. Quiet and careful, just like her. Months passed. Her hands grew stronger. Her confidence deeper. She no longer practiced on tables or walls. She had real keys now, real sound filling real rooms. One afternoon, she was asked to play again in front of people. A small gathering. Nothing grand. She almost said no. Almost. When she sat at the piano, she remembered the first time. The laughter. The doubt. The words that tried to shrink her. She played anyway. The response was warm. Genuine. People didn't clap out of surprise this time. They clapped because they understood. The man watched from the back of the room. When it ended, he nodded once, satisfied. "You didn't just surprise people," he told her later. "You changed how they see." She thought about that for a long time. Opportunities continued to come, slowly and honestly. She never forgot where she started. She never pretended it was easy. She still worked. She still helped her family. Music didn't replace her life. It became part of it. One day, during another event at the same hall where everything began, a young worker stood near the piano. staring the way she once had. She noticed. She walked over and asked gently, "Do you like music?" The worker nodded, nervous. "Have you ever tried?" she asked. The worker shook their head. She smiled and stepped aside. "You should," she said. From across the room, the man watched this moment unfold. He understood then that the real change was not in her success, but in what she passed forward. That evening, as the hall filled with sound and life, he approached her one last time. "I was wrong," he said simply. She looked at him. "You listened eventually," she replied. He smiled truly this time. As she sat at the piano again, the keys no longer felt distant or forbidden. They felt familiar, earned. She began to play, and in the quiet between the notes, a story of doubt, courage, and quiet strength lived on, reminding everyone in the room that talent does not ask where you come from. It only asks that